The rain never stopped on Sector 9. It fell in heavy sheets against the cracked windows of the repair shop, turning the streets outside into rivers of mud and forgotten dreams. Inside the cluttered workspace, Thomas Reed wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag and stared at the pile of broken machines covering his workbench. He was 32 years old, but he felt twice that age. The lines on his face told stories of sleepless nights and endless repairs, each one blending into the next until time itself became meaningless. The shop had belonged to his father once. Back when Sector 9 was still a thriving community, now it was just another forgotten corner of the city, where people came only when they had nowhere else to go. Thomas didn't mind the solitude. It gave him time to think, time to work, time to forget about the world outside that had moved on without him. He was examining a broken water purifier when the door chimed. Thomas looked up and saw a young woman standing in the doorway, rain dripping from her dark hair onto the floor. She carried something wrapped in a silver cloth, holding it against her chest like it was the most precious thing in the world. Her eyes were red from crying and her hands trembled as she stepped inside. "Are you the mechanic?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The one who can fix anything?" Thomas set down his tools and walked toward her. "I'm Thomas Reed. I fix things, yeah. What do you need?" The woman unwrapped the cloth with careful movements, revealing a small mechanical creature. It looked like a combination of a bird and a dragon, with delicate wings made of copper and silver and a body no bigger than Thomas's hand. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, every feather etched with intricate patterns, every scale perfectly formed. But the creature was damaged. One wing hung broken, the metal twisted and torn. The eyes that should have glowed with life were dark and empty. "This was my grandmother's," the woman said, tears streaming down her face. "She gave it to me before she died 3 days ago. She said it was the last gift from my grandfather, made before he went to war and never came back. It worked until yesterday and then it just stopped. I know it's just a machine, but it's all I have left of them. Please, can you fix it?" Thomas took the mechanical creature carefully, feeling the weight of it in his hands. It was old, much older than the woman realized. The metal was an alloy he had never seen before, and the internal mechanisms visible through the damaged wing were unlike anything in his experience. This wasn't just a toy or a trinket. This was art, created by someone who understood machines on a level that bordered on magic. "I don't have much money," the woman continued, reaching into her pocket, "but I have this." She held out a small crystal pendant, blue and shimmering in the dim light. "It was my grandmother's too. It's all I can offer." Thomas should have said no. He should have explained that his time was valuable, that repairs like this took days or weeks, that a single pendant wasn't enough payment for the work required. But something in the woman's eyes stopped him. He saw genuine pain there, the kind of grief that came from losing everything that mattered. He remembered feeling that same pain when his father died, leaving him alone with nothing but a shop full of broken machines and broken dreams. "Leave it with me," Thomas said quietly, taking the pendant and setting it on his workbench. "I'll see what I can do. Come back in 5 days." The woman's face lit up with hope. She thanked him repeatedly, gave him her contact information, and left the shop with lighter steps than when she had entered. Thomas watched her go, then turned his attention to the mechanical creature on his workbench. He cleared away the other projects and set up his brightest work lamp, positioning it directly over the creature. "All right, little one," he said softly, talking to himself as he always did when working alone. "Let's see what's wrong with you." He spent the first hour just examining the creature, turning it slowly in his hands and studying every detail. The damage was extensive. The broken wing was obvious, but as he looked closer, Thomas discovered more problems. Corrosion had eaten through several internal components. Gears had seized up from lack of maintenance. Wires had frayed and disconnected. And in the center of it all, nestled in the creature's chest, was a power source unlike anything Thomas had ever encountered. It looked like a tiny star, a sphere of crystal that pulsed with faint internal light. The light was weak, barely visible, like a candle flame about to go out. Thomas had no idea what kind of technology this was. It defied every principle of power generation he had learned. But he could see the connections, the way energy should flow from the sphere through carefully designed channels to every part of the creature's body. Thomas began to work. He started with the wing, carefully straightening the bent metal and reinforcing the damaged sections with micro-welding. The work required absolute precision, each movement of his tools measured in fractions of a millimeter. One mistake and he would destroy the delicate balance of the wing's structure. He worked for hours, his eyes straining through a magnifying visor, his hands steady despite the fatigue building in his muscles. When the wing was repaired, Thomas moved to the internal mechanisms. He cleaned away the corrosion with chemical solutions and soft brushes, revealing the beautiful machinery beneath. The gears were works of art, each one carved with patterns that served no functional purpose but made them beautiful to look at. Thomas fabricated new gears where the old ones had failed, matching the size and design as closely as he could. The wiring took another day. Thomas had to trace every connection, figure out where each wire was supposed to go, and replace the damaged sections with new conductors. He worked slowly, methodically, checking and rechecking each connection before moving to the next. There was no room for error. One wrong wire and the creature might never work again, or worse, it might work incorrectly and damage itself further. Finally, 3 days after the woman had left the creature with him, Thomas was ready to address the power source. This was the part he had been dreading. He understood mechanical systems, electrical circuits, hydraulic pressure, but this crystalline sphere that glowed with its own internal light was beyond his knowledge. He had no manual to consult, no reference materials to study. He was working blind, relying purely on intuition and observation. Thomas cleaned the connections around the sphere, removing decades of accumulated grime and oxidation. He checked every contact point, ensuring they were clean and properly aligned. Then he sat back and simply looked at the sphere, watching the faint pulse of light within it. The light was dying, he could see that clearly. Whatever energy source powered this device was running out after decades or perhaps centuries of use. "I don't know how to recharge you," Thomas said to the sphere, his voice quiet in the empty shop. "I don't even know what you are, but that woman needs this creature to work. It's the last connection she has to her family. So please, if there's any power left in you, wake up." Nothing happened. The sphere continued its faint pulsing, no stronger, no weaker. Thomas felt frustration building inside him. He had spent 3 days on this repair, working harder than he had on any project in years, and it was all going to be for nothing because he couldn't figure out this one component. He was about to give up when he noticed something strange. When he spoke, the sphere's light brightened slightly. It was barely perceptible, just a tiny increase in intensity, but it was there. Thomas leaned closer, studying the sphere carefully. "Can you hear me?" he asked. The light pulsed brighter just for a moment, then faded back to its previous level. Thomas's heart raced. This was impossible. Power sources didn't respond to sound. They were inert objects storing and releasing energy according to physical laws, nothing more. But this sphere was reacting to his voice, to his words. Thomas began to talk to the sphere. He explained what he had done, how he had repaired the wing and the gears and the wiring. He told the sphere about the woman who had brought the creature to him, about her grief and her hope. He described how much this repair meant to her, how it was the last piece of her family's history. And as he talked, the sphere's light grew stronger. The light spread through the creature's body, following the channels Thomas had cleaned and repaired. It flowed into the wings, making them glow with soft amber warmth. It reached the eyes, igniting them with intelligence and awareness. The gears began to turn, clicking softly as they found their rhythm. The creature's head lifted and its wings stretched out in a graceful arc. Then it opened its beak and sang. The sound was like nothing Thomas had ever heard, a crystalline melody that filled the shop and seemed to resonate in his very bones. The creature looked at Thomas with eyes that held something beyond simple programming. There was awareness there, perhaps even gratitude. Thomas laughed, the sound surprising him. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed with genuine joy. He reached out carefully and the creature hopped onto his finger, its weight barely noticeable. It folded its wings and settled there, still singing its beautiful song. "You're alive," Thomas whispered. "You're really alive." In the shadows of the shop where Thomas couldn't see, a small surveillance device recorded everything. The device had been there for weeks, placed by someone who had been searching for this particular creation for a very long time. Now that person knew exactly where it was, and more importantly, they knew about the human who had accomplished the impossible by bringing it back to life. 5 days after Thomas had received the mechanical creature, the woman returned to his shop. Her name was Elena Hartley, and she looked different than she had before. The grief was still in her eyes, but it was mixed with hope now, a fragile thing that she carried carefully like glass. Thomas had the creature waiting in a padded box on his workbench. When Elena walked in, he opened the box and the creature immediately came to life. Its wings spread wide, catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. It sang its crystalline song and hopped onto the edge of the box, looking at Elena with recognition in its glowing eyes. Elena's hands flew to her mouth and tears streamed down her face. "You fixed it," she whispered. "You actually fixed it. I didn't think it was possible." The creature launched itself from the box and flew in a graceful circle around Elena's head before landing on her shoulder. It nuzzled against her cheek, its song changing to something softer, more comforting. Elena laughed through her tears and gently stroked the creature's head with one finger. Thomas watched the reunion with a small smile. This was why he did this work, why he spent countless hours fixing broken things for people who could barely afford to pay him. These moments of pure joy made everything worthwhile. "Thank you," Elena said, looking at Thomas with gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you so much. You don't know what this means to me." "I'm glad I could help," Thomas replied. He held out the crystal pendant she had given him. "You should keep this. The repair didn't cost as much as I thought it would." But Elena shook her head firmly. "No, you earned it. You brought my family's last treasure back to life. That pendant is a small price to pay." She paused, looking at the creature on her shoulder. "My grandmother told me stories about this creature. She said my grandfather made it himself, that he was a genius who could create machines that seemed alive. I always thought they were just stories, but now I believe them. This is more than just a machine, isn't it?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Yes, I think it is. The technology inside it is beyond anything I've ever seen. The power source especially. It's like it has its own consciousness, like it understands and responds to emotion. I've never encountered anything like it." Elena smiled and carefully placed the creature back in its box. She thanked Thomas again and left the shop, cradling the box like it contained the world's most precious treasure. Thomas watched her go, feeling satisfied with a job well done. He expected never to see her again, to move on to the next repair and let this strange, beautiful creation fade into memory. He was wrong. 2 days later, Thomas was closing his shop for the night when 3 figures appeared in his doorway. They were tall and moved with predatory grace, their faces hidden behind dark helmets that reflected the shop's dim lights. They wore armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and they carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. "Thomas Reed," one of them said, the voice distorted by the helmet into something mechanical and cold. "You will come with us. Do not resist. Do not call for help. Your cooperation will be rewarded." Thomas's heart hammered in his chest. He had lived in Sector 9 long enough to know when resistance was futile. These weren't common criminals or local gang members. These were professionals, probably mercenaries hired by someone with serious resources. He raised his hand slowly, showing he wasn't armed. "What do you want?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Information," the figure replied, "about a device you recently repaired. You will tell us everything you know." They took Thomas from his shop, leading him through the rainy streets to a vehicle parked in a nearby alley. The vehicle was sleek and expensive, completely out of place in Sector 9's poverty. Thomas was pushed inside, and the vehicle took off before he could even think about escape. They drove for over an hour, leaving the city behind and heading into the wasteland that surrounded it. Thomas had never been this far from home. The landscape outside was desolate, nothing but rocky terrain and ruins of buildings destroyed in the war that had ended before he was born. Finally, the vehicle stopped at what looked like an abandoned research facility, a massive structure half buried in sand and debris. Inside, the facility was anything but abandoned. Lights blazed in every corridor, and dozens of people worked at computer stations and laboratory benches. Thomas was taken to a large room filled with strange equipment and machines he couldn't identify. In the center of the room, suspended in a containment field, was a robot. It was humanoid in shape, but clearly not human. Its body was constructed from the same strange alloy as the mechanical creature Thomas had repaired, covered in intricate patterns and designs that served no obvious function. It stood motionless in the containment field, its eyes dark and lifeless. Cables ran from various ports on its body to monitoring equipment surrounding the field. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a woman's voice said from behind Thomas. He turned and saw a tall woman in her 50s approaching, wearing a white coat and an expression of barely contained excitement. "My name is Dr. Olivia Stone. I'm the director of this facility, and I've been searching for that little mechanical creature you repaired for almost 15 years. Thomas stared at her, confusion mixing with fear. "Why? What's so important about it?" Dr. Stone walked to the containment field and placed her hand against the transparent barrier. "Because it's the key to waking this up. This robot was created over 400 years ago by a civilization that no longer exists. It was discovered in an archaeological dig 30 years ago, perfectly preserved but completely inactive. We've tried everything to bring it online, every power source, every activation protocol we could think of. Nothing worked, until we learned about the smaller creations, the mechanical familiars that used the same technology. If we can understand how you activated the creature's power source, we can apply that knowledge to wake this robot." Thomas looked at the robot, a chill running down his spine. "What happens if you wake it up?" "We learn," Dr. Stone said simply. "We gain access to technology that's centuries beyond our current capabilities. We discover the secrets of a civilization that could create machines with consciousness, with souls. We change everything." She turned to face Thomas, her eyes intense. "You activated that creature's power source when every expert we consulted said it was impossible. You spoke to it and it responded. You treated it with care and respect, and somehow that made the difference. We need you to do the same thing with this robot. We need you to wake it up." Thomas shook his head. "I don't know what I did. It was instinct, just talking while I worked. I can't replicate that on command, especially not with something this size, this complex." "You will try," Dr. Stone said firmly. "Because if you don't, we'll find the woman who currently possesses the creature you repaired. We'll take it from her, study it, disassemble it if necessary. But if you cooperate, if you help us wake this robot, we'll leave her alone. The creature will remain with her, and you'll be compensated generously for your assistance." The threat was clear. Thomas felt anger rise in him, hot and sharp. He thought about Elena's face when she had seen the creature come to life, the joy and relief that had transformed her. He couldn't let these people take that away from her. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll try, but I can't promise anything." Dr. Stone smiled. "That's all we ask." They released the robot from the containment field and laid it on a massive examination table. Thomas was given tools and equipment, along with access to all the facility's resources. He spent hours studying the robot, mapping its internal systems and trying to understand the technology that powered it. The robot was incredible. Every part of it was designed with purpose and beauty combined, function and art inseparable. The power source was identical to the one in the creature, a crystalline sphere that should have been glowing but remained dark. Thomas could see how everything was supposed to work, how energy should flow through channels etched into the robot's body to bring it to life. But knowing how it should work and making it actually work were very different things. Days passed. Thomas worked without rest, driven by the threat hanging over Elena and her precious creature. He cleaned every connection, checked every system, repaired minor damage caused by centuries of inactivity. The robot was in perfect condition mechanically, but it remained stubbornly lifeless. On the 5th day, exhausted and frustrated, Thomas sat beside the examination table and simply looked at the robot. Its face was peaceful, almost serene, with features that were neither masculine nor feminine but somehow both. The artistry in its construction was breathtaking, every line and curve deliberate and meaningful. "I don't know what they expect from me," Thomas said quietly, speaking to the robot as he had spoken to the creature. "I'm just a mechanic from a forgotten part of the city. I fix broken things because it's the only skill I have. I don't understand your technology, your power source, any of this. I just did what felt right and somehow it worked. But I don't know if I can do it again." He paused, looking at the robot's closed eyes. "They're threatening someone I helped, someone who's already lost so much. I can't let them hurt her. So please, if you can hear me, if there's any consciousness in you at all, wake up. Not for them, not for their research or their ambitions. Wake up because it's time. Wake up because the world needs what you represent. Needs to remember that machines can be more than tools, that they can be art and beauty and maybe even life itself." Thomas reached out and placed his hand on the robot's chest, feeling the cool metal beneath his palm. "Wake up," he whispered. The power sphere in the robot's chest began to glow. The light started as barely a flicker, just like it had with the creature. But this time Thomas knew what was happening. He kept his hand on the robot's chest and continued talking, his voice steady and calm. "That's it," he said softly. "Come back. The world's been waiting for you for a very long time." The light grew stronger, spreading through channels in the robot's body like luminous blood through veins. The patterns etched into its metal skin began to glow, and Thomas realized they weren't just decorative. They were part of the power distribution system, designed to be beautiful and functional simultaneously. Around him, alarms started blaring. Dr. Stone and her team rushed into the room, surrounding the examination table with instruments and scanners. But Thomas ignored them all. His focus was entirely on the robot, on the intelligence he could feel awakening beneath his hand. The robot's eyes opened. They were deep blue, the color of Earth's oceans before pollution had turned them gray. Those eyes looked directly at Thomas, and he saw recognition there, saw awareness and understanding that went far beyond simple programming. "Hello," Thomas said, smiling despite his exhaustion. "Welcome back." The robot sat up slowly, its movements fluid and natural. It looked at its hands, flexing the fingers experimentally, then turned its attention back to Thomas. When it spoke, its voice was like music, neither male nor female, but something perfectly balanced between them. "You woke me," the robot said. "After so long in darkness, you brought me back. Why?" Thomas glanced at Dr. Stone, who watched with barely contained excitement, then back at the robot. "Because they threatened to hurt someone I care about if I didn't. Because I was curious. Because I think you deserve to be awake, to exist in the world again. Take your pick." The robot tilted its head, studying Thomas with those impossibly deep eyes. "Honesty. How refreshing. What is your name?" "Thomas Reed. I'm a mechanic. I fix broken things, and I am Cassian," the robot replied. "I was created to be a guardian, a protector of knowledge and beauty in a civilization that no longer exists. I remember falling into darkness, remember my creators saying goodbye as their world ended around them." "How long has it been?" 400 years, Dr. Stone interjected, stepping forward eagerly. "Your civilization was destroyed in the Great Collapse. We found you in the ruins of what we believe was a museum or library. You're the most intact example of your people's technology we've ever discovered. There's so much we need to learn from you, so many questions we need answered." Cassian looked at her, and Dr. Stone actually took a step back. There was something unsettling in that gaze, something that made it clear Cassian was not a tool to be studied and dissected. "I will answer questions," Cassian said carefully, "but I'm not a specimen for your laboratories. I am conscious, aware, alive in ways you may not fully understand. If I cooperate with you, it will be as an equal, not as a subject." "Of course," Dr. Stone said quickly, though Thomas could see the calculation in her eyes. "We respect your autonomy completely. We just want to learn, to understand the incredible technology your creators developed." Cassian stood, and everyone in the room tensed. The robot was tall, almost 7 feet, and moved with a grace that made human movement seem clumsy by comparison. It walked to Thomas and placed a hand on his shoulder, the touch gentle and almost affectionate. "You have kindness in you," Cassian said. "I can feel it. The same kindness that led you to repair my smaller sibling, the creature you brought back to life. You did not work for reward or recognition. You worked because you saw value in something others considered broken and worthless. This is rare in any age, but especially rare now." Thomas felt his face flush. "I just do my job." "You do more than that," Cassian replied. "You give broken things a second chance. You believe in repair rather than replacement, in restoration rather than disposal. Your world has forgotten this wisdom, but my creators valued it above almost everything else. They would have liked you." Over the following weeks, Thomas found himself spending almost all his time at the research facility. Dr. Stone's team wanted him there to help communicate with Cassian, who seemed more willing to cooperate when Thomas was present. The robot shared knowledge freely, explaining principles of power generation, material science, and construction techniques that were centuries ahead of current technology. But Cassian also asked questions. It wanted to know about the current world, about humanity's achievements and failures, about how society had changed in 4 centuries. Thomas did his best to answer, though many times he felt inadequate to explain the complexities of modern life. "Your people struggle," Cassian observed one day while they sat together in a quiet corner of the facility. "I can see it in your eyes, in the way you carry yourself. There is pain in this world that did not exist in mine. Thomas nodded. The war changed everything. We lost so much knowledge, so many resources. What you see now is humanity trying to rebuild from almost nothing. Some places are better than others, but areas like where I live, they've been forgotten, left to rot while others prosper. Cassian was quiet for a long moment. My creators faced a similar divide. It was part of what destroyed them. They allowed some to prosper while others suffered, and eventually the suffering ones rose up. The war that followed consumed everything. When they built me and my siblings, they hoped we would preserve what mattered most, that we would carry their knowledge and wisdom into whatever future remained. But the darkness came too quickly. Most of us never woke, and those who did fell silent long ago. Except you, Thomas said, and the creature I fixed. Except us, Cassian agreed. Because of you? Because you saw value where others saw only broken metal. You gave us a second chance, Thomas Reed. Now I want to give your people the same gift. Over the next few months, everything changed. Cassian worked with Dr. Stone's team to recreate technologies from its creator's civilization. New power generation methods that were clean and efficient. Materials that were stronger and lighter than anything previously developed. Construction techniques that could rebuild entire cities in a fraction of the time current methods required. But Cassian insisted on conditions. The technology had to be shared freely, made available to everyone rather than hoarded by the wealthy and powerful. Priority had to be given to the most damaged areas, places like Sector 9 that had been abandoned and forgotten, and Thomas had to be involved in every step, serving as Cassian's liaison and advocate. Thomas found himself thrust into a world he had never imagined, working with scientists and politicians, speaking at conferences and planning sessions. It was overwhelming and terrifying, but Cassian was always there offering support and guidance. The robot had become more than just a project or a curiosity. It had become a friend. 1 year after Cassian had awakened, Thomas returned to Sector 9. The transformation was already beginning. New power generators hummed quietly on rooftops, providing clean electricity to buildings that had gone dark decades ago. Construction crews worked to repair streets and infrastructure, using techniques Cassian had taught them. People who had been struggling just to survive now had hope for the first time in generations. Thomas walked to his old repair shop, which he had kept despite his new responsibilities. Elena was waiting for him there. The mechanical creature perched on her shoulder as always. It sang when it saw Thomas, a joyful crystalline melody. "You've changed the world," Elena said, smiling. "All because you fixed a broken toy for a grieving woman." Thomas shook his head. "Cassian changed the world. I just gave it a chance to wake up." "You gave it more than that," Cassian's voice said from behind him. The robot had followed Thomas to Sector 9, wanting to see the changes taking place. "You gave me purpose again. You reminded me why my creators built me, what they hoped I would achieve. Without you, I would still be sleeping in darkness, a relic of a dead civilization. Instead, I am helping to build something new, something better." The creature flew from Elena's shoulder and landed on Cassian's outstretched hand. The robot smiled, a gentle expression that transformed its face from beautiful to radiant. "My little sibling," Cassian said softly. "You led me home. You brought me to the one person in all this world who would give me a chance." Thomas watched them, the ancient robot and the delicate mechanical creature, both alive because he had refused to give up on broken things. He thought about all the years he had spent in his forgotten shop, fixing machines for people who could barely pay, feeling like his life had no greater purpose. He had been wrong. Every repair, every careful restoration, every moment of patience and care had been preparing him for this. "Come on," Thomas said, gesturing toward his shop. "I've got about 100 projects waiting inside. If we're going to rebuild this sector, we're going to need a lot of working equipment." Cassian laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Then let us begin, together," and together they did.